Welcome to the Mayans Concert Band Spring Concert. Another round of applause to Percussion Ensemble. As we're getting set up, we'll have a few chamber. Welcome back. As you can see, there are different percussion instruments here now. These are all marching percussion instruments. Everyone that is in, or almost everyone that is in HEMU 101, 201, 301, 401 is in marching band / athletic band, marching band, pep band. So throughout the semester, we also played at all the home.
Next up is Leaf Wagner. Next up is our movements. No order? I'm so sorry. Next up we have Madeline Hunter. Next up we have Brian Gay. Next up we have Thomas Manfredo. Next up graduating in computer science and plays percussion for the band. His favorite band memory was playing a variety of songs with other percussionists and percussion ensemble each spring. Next up we have Tyler Baker. Tyler graduated in geophysical engineering and plays tuba for the band.
Leo is the band fraternity historian, so history in the making, right? Out that way. And there's some really fun just harmonies in it and chords. It was actually arranged by a Japanese arranger, so there's really fun takes on what jazz means, what dance means, what joy means in music. So enjoy El Cumbanchero. choral music, especially. If you went to the choir concert last night, they sang a very serious lullaby by Eric Whitacre. This is not serious. The composer even said he laughed out loud when he found out that the Marine Band played this outside the Capitol, that he couldn't believe that they would play this in such a serious venue. So, some of his inspiration, he spent 7 years to get his undergrad degree in music composition. He did not want to spend 7 years. He had to in order to graduate. How many people feel like they have spent longer in their undergrad than they might want to? A couple, yes, all right. So he went to school in Las Vegas. So it was University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And it was 7 years. He said by the time he was ready to graduate, he was ready to leave Las Vegas. So instead, his first year in his master's, he ended up at Juilliard. The band director back at his undergrad commissioned a piece from him and asked, "Can you write a piece for us?" And this is what he came up with. It has 30 different stylistic changes within the piece, lots of time changes, and some theater. So with that, he would use animal crackers to practice what he would do in this stage. There's a whole script that follows Godzilla, who falls in love with a sphinx, who deals with marching Elvi, or the plural of Elvis, of course. So there's a march scene through here too. There's some jazz elements. So if you think of Vegas, there will be some of that fun too. Who has costumes on right now, possibly? There's one. Yes, we have a very fancy piano player who will actually slam on the entire piano at one point. Get ready for that. There we have these backdrops. So the percussion ensemble actually collaborated with the Futures course here, which is mostly for incoming freshmen to be introduced to different themes. And the theme that we dealt with was time, and what that means through different lenses throughout the campus community. So for music, what does time mean for a musician, for a percussionist? It's not just the meter or playing in the right time, it's also the history of the music. So this is a fun piece to show that even, composers are people too. They can poke fun at their struggles as undergrad students, and who has struggled at some point in their undergrad experience. Yes, it happens. And so this is a celebration of that. A lot of the pieces before this were about joy. There's a lot of joy and kind of tongue-in-cheek humor that happens throughout here too. We will have a villain, so get ready for the villain. And yes, we are very excited to present to you Godzilla Eats Las Vegas. coming tonight. I'm really glad you enjoyed that piece as much as we did preparing it. It's a really fun piece. We look forward to seeing you next semester at the next concert. Thank you again for coming out tonight.